People are dying and we are focusing on bureaucracy. This is our coordination system.
This is the Digital Humanitarian, where we explore how technology is transforming crisis response.
In this conversation, we talk about what happens when coordination breaks down, what it means to localize power, and how technology, when used the right way, can bring real change. We're going back to 2021, following the devastating 7.2 magnitude earthquake in Haiti. Our guest, Abril Páez, is a humanitarian leader. She spent years coordinating rapid response efforts in some of the most challenging crisis zones in the world. Abril brings a deep on-the-ground perspective and a commitment to challenging how things have always been done. All right, so welcome, Abril.
Hi, I'm really happy to be here.
Really, really good to have you as well. So here's where the story really begins today. We're talking about Haiti, 2021, massive earthquake, an overwhelmed health system, really an urgent need. And there was one group that really needed to improvise to help those people in need. Help me set the scene where we were when we got to Haiti in 2021.
I remember everything was chaos. There was a lot of suffering, many buildings and many houses. You know that Haiti is the poorest country in Latin America. So the structures and the materials that they used to build the houses are not stable materials. So most of the houses were collapsed. And because of the hour that the earthquake happened, there were many people inside the houses. So there were many, many people that were severely injured and that were still inside the rubbish. So the organizations we started to arrive, all that I could sense was chaos. Everyone was just wandering around, but no one actually knew which were like the most affected communities, which were the most urgent needs. There was this big coordination center with the traditional international actors where we gather every day to share information. And I remember that some weeks before, the president of the country was murdered. So there was a lot of insecurity. There was a sense of insecurity, right? Because actually, many organizations didn't want to be deployed because of this. So we were not many actors as we usually are. That was one of the first challenges. The second challenge, it was that most of the organizations just stayed in the capital, in Port-au-Prince, because it was the most secure place, because everywhere outside was super dangerous and it was uncertain. So we were just a couple organizations that we were actually on the ground. And this was really frustrating because we were able to see what was happening on the ground and all the needs and all the suffering. And these people that were on this coordination center every day back from their hotel had no idea of what was needed. But at the same time, they were angry about us not doing and using what they were asking us to do, right? So I remember that there was a lot of chaos of items and just general like stuff and infrastructure, the humanitarian sector that was stored in a storage from the Haiti government. And it was there, laying there because of the bureaucracy and the lack of coordination. And it was super frustrating that everything was there because there was nobody doing an efficient management of the information on the ground.
Yeah, it was really frustrating. Piles of aid just waiting there because you can't reach them because of bureaucracy. I mean, I was there with you and I remember it was crazy. I mean, you had a massive need. It was super evident, completely chaotic situation, and you're asking for help and they're sending you towards bureaucracy. And that's really the official coordination mechanism. Fill out a pen and paper, send it over.
And at the end of the day, I could think about it like, this isn't right. This can be allowed in the humanitarian system. People are dying and we are focusing on bureaucracy. This is our coordination system. And I remember that a few days later, I met you and I spoke with you about this. I mean, I finally found someone who was as frustrated as me, and we shared this same desire to make things different on the ground.
The team that I was leading, we were doing different things, but also we kept running into the same problem. We didn't know what's happening. We didn't know what's actually being coordinated, where the aid is going. And the traditional kind of system of coordination were just not apt for the challenge. So tell me, Abril, so we met and we started thinking about it and we decided to go rogue, honestly. Should maybe share with us a little bit about, your experience and our experience back then.
Okay, so every day we would meet at that coordination center was just to pretend and we just spit out information because everyone was speaking, everyone was sharing some stuff, but no one was actually gathering the information together. Every one of us was lost. We didn't know who was needing the aid, where was the aid needed, and who had what, right? So I remember that we were thinking about what do we do? Like, we cannot stay like this. We're seeing on the ground that people need stuff. There are some organizations that have stuff but don't know where to send it or where to deploy the teams. So we started organizing WhatsApp groups based on clusters, and we created these Excel sheets where people could easily register all the information in real time. And honestly, it worked. We were super surprised that we had like 200 organizations in 1 or 2 days, and even local organizations that were sharing information, that were using that information. And I am not saying that WhatsApp or Excel are ideal tools, right? Of course, there are some mechanisms that could be useful, but I mean, the idea was proof right there is that the traditional coordination mechanisms were not useful. They were super slow, they were super technical, and they weren't accessible for people on the ground. So it was shown that something needed to change in terms of how we were managing the information among all the organizations and the local organizations and the people affected.
Yeah. And I remember that. I think what was really interesting is to see that it's not just the international aid organizations that joined all our groups. And we are talking about a shared spreadsheet and we're talking about WhatsApp, the most basic kind of level of coordination and technology, but still it meant so much. And I think what was really impactful for me, probably for you also, is like what you're saying, it's the local organizations. It's not necessarily just the international organizations, the white savior. It's really the people on the ground. They want to know also, those responding. They want to know who's here, what are they doing, who can they speak to? Did they end up kind of reaching out to you and using those mechanisms to coordinate with you and all your resources?
Yeah, I remember that there were several local organizations that were asking for help. And I remember that my team had a lot of water filters and solar lamps with us, but we were actually focused on everything related to health and the surgeons with the injured people, right? So we didn't have time by then to deliver those items. So I remember them asking for someone who had water filters and solar lamps. And I thought, we should give it to them. They are the ones who are knowing what's happening on the ground. And let's stop this ego culture of wanting to be there just because we want the name of our organizations to be shown everywhere. So we were able to give them all our supplies, and they were distributing them in schools, in hospitals, in medical centers. So it was actually amazing, and it was really good because we built also from their side a sense of confidence. So they were starting to trust international organizations that were approaching them and trying to tell them what they need during this disaster. Their voices were heard during all the process, and I would say that that's the most important thing during humanitarian context.
100%. Their voices were heard throughout the response, and I think that's huge. You're talking a lot about ego and about trust, and there was one organization that reached out to me I was delivering kits for children to help them throughout that period. And one organization reached out to me, came to me, one of the big international ones, and told me and my team, get out of here. Haven't you seen in the coordination meeting? This is our region. This is where we help. And I was shocked. But through those groups that we started, we had so many small organizations saying, listen, this is where we work. We have the full kind of reach to the community. We know exactly what they need. Help us with resources. And we were there immediately. And that really was the tool that helped us all coordinate. Abril, I wanted to ask you, and you talk again about the trust and you talk about this. What did this experience kind of show you?
I would say it changed my life in many ways because before this disaster, I was always frustrated for not being working or being part of these big international traditional humanitarian coordination mechanisms. I had this sense of having this obligation of always going to these coordination meetings and trying to learn everything that they were doing and trying to be part of these elite groups, right? So when I was in Haiti, it was the first time that I witnessed the consequences, like in real time, of being slow and of being not efficient in terms of coordinating and sharing information. So everything that we did together and this initiative of to build something that could be used by anyone in the scenario, it brought hope to me because I realized that I didn't need to be part of those traditional coordination mechanisms or those big international organizations to actually make a big impact. And what we were doing, we were actually more connected to the people. And in the end, these big international organizations were using our information to make all the decisions that they were doing because we were the only ones on the ground sharing the information and managing information. So the way we process information and the way we coordinate with each other changes. It is not efficient. It is built for a totally different reality for people with computers on a desk that take slow, bureaucratic, and technical procedures to help someone, right?
So you're saying kind of trust came, hope came from that experience for you. And it really sounds like there was a system and it was decentralized and it was democratized. Everyone can now access it. And there's no manager, there's no owner of the system. I think that was really the beauty of it. And since when you kind of continue to respond in other places or before in your previous role, was it something you continued doing? I mean, I'm sure not with spreadsheets, probably like with other tools, but is it something you kind of kept on following? Let's use digital tools to democratize this?
First of all, I would say that one of the biggest lessons for me was how important it was for the affected communities and the local organizations to be able to feel whatever they were seeing or whatever they were needing to put those inputs on whatever system was built. I would say that for me that was the biggest lesson of all. So every time I went to another disasters, I was constantly trying to push that the people were able to use those mechanisms. It doesn't matter if it was a spreadsheet or any other technology developed, which of course it's necessary because as I was telling you, whatever happens on the ground, it is constantly changing every second. So we need to accept that we need technology because it's impossible to be everywhere every single second. So we needed something where people could be able to speak in real time about what's happening on the ground. And I remember that that's when you were developing different tools. So us as organizations could represent in all the formats that you were developing which were like the most basic questions that needed to be answered by anybody who was on the ground. And I remember how great it was in Morocco, in other disasters where it was actually super easy for us. And I remember telling the people on the affected communities, do you have a cell phone? Yeah. Do you have network? Yeah, or if not, it doesn't matter. This can work without internet, but great. So I'm gonna give you this link, and you are gonna help me to fill all this information. And it was actually super easy because we had information in real time.
Imagine we had that in Haiti, giving every
Yeah.
person on the ground the ability to speak up, like you're saying. We can't be everywhere all the time, but with technology we can, and kind of empowering other people to bring their information forward. I think we did it on a small scale in Haiti, but I agree the potential is massive. And Abril, let me ask you, what brings you now moving forward? We were talking about the hope. What is it when you're looking at disaster response, especially in those crazy times that we're going through in the humanitarian space, and you're looking at technology as a sidekick? What brings you hope in this?
I would say that the traditional humanitarian system was made for a totally different reality, and that was super frustrating for me. So, in crisis situations, real time decisions need to be made by people on the ground, whether it is us humanitarian workers or people affected by the crisis, right? But the current system tends to centralize power, tends to centralize information in places far removed from the emergency. So instead of enabling frontline responders and affected communities, it paralyzes them with paperwork, protocols, top-down conditions that doesn't match the urgency of the moment. And I would say that it's not that the people on the system don't care. I would say that they deeply do, but the mechanisms that they are developing are completely inaccessible. They are outdated. They doesn't respond to the fast changing nature of the crisis. So that's why you and other organizations developing these tools that could actually reflect what people actually need and allow us to coordinate in emergencies gives me a lot of hope. But the deep root of it is that you are changing and you're shifting the power of the organizations and affected communities. The fact that you want people to speak and their voices to be heard and to be them to tell us what they need and not us telling them what they need, I think that's the most beautiful thing of it because we are shifting the power, which is actually the deep root cause of many problems in our world.
No, 100%. I mean, it's the problem and the core, the root cause of so many things is the power grab. And I think what you've done and what you've been doing since, kind of taking technology to shift that power paradigm and transition it back to the local communities, those people that are affected, those people who know how to respond, that is huge. And the fact that technology enables us to do that is just so necessary. I think when we were looking at it in 2020 or 2021, I think it was a nice to have. Let's use this cool thing. It's really a nice addition. And today I feel like in every disaster I go to, probably you as well, it's a must. You can't operate without it because then you're back to the old systems and they just don't work.
Yeah.
Abril, I really want to zoom in on hope. It's something you say, it's something you bring forward, and I think it's beautiful. And I would love to hear more from you about it. What is it? Where does it come from? How does it look like? How do digital tools and technology bring that to you when you've seen kind of what you've done and where you are today?
After so many years of responding in disasters, when I started working in this job as a humanitarian worker, I used to feel really, really sad every time I went to a disaster because it's a complex scenario, right? So you see a lot of people suffering, a lot of people who lost everything. But when you start doing it a lot and knowing many, many communities who are suffering, you stop seeing them as only people who are suffering. Because, of course, they are suffering, but they are resilient people. I don't know a single community who just laid down there and said, "Oh, this is super sad. I'm going to stay here." Every human has a force and power inside. We have force and power inside ourselves. We get together as social people and we form communities and we help each other. So there's a lot of power and there's a lot of resilience in every single community in the world. And the humanitarian system and humanitarian workers should be helping that power and that resilience so the people can start raising themselves and recovering by themselves. And I would say that thinking like this is really different from thinking, oh, poor people, I'm going to send them whatever I have, right? So when you start realizing that the people have agency and that they have the capacity to improve their own situation, you will need to start by asking, what do you need? Instead of saying, this is what you need. So in order to do that, you need tools to understand what people need from their own mouth, hands, and minds, right? So doing these fast, flexible, and human-centered technology mechanisms, for me, it's really hopeful because it's not just only about gathering information, as I was telling you. It's about putting people in the center of what we are doing. It's not just a technology. It's shifting power. It's stop seeing people as passive agents. It's start hearing what people need. And I would say this is the first and most important step towards changing how we are seeing ourselves as humanitarian actors and to actually be able to help them recover by themselves because they have the capacity to do it.
So basically, you're saying ask the right questions, democratize it, and then provide those solutions, but in a resilient way, in a way that builds resilience and not dependency. And technology can facilitate this. You can ask the questions at a mass scale. Many people get kind of real insights, like you're saying, real-time data, real-time insights, and then provide those solutions to build stronger communities even more.
As humanitarian worker, this is super important because if you keep responding from the other perspective, you will totally be burned out because you are just focused on suffering and seeing people without agency. But when you see it from the other side, it gives you hope in general with humanity. So you are more focused on actually helping and providing solutions for the people, and you focus on their strengths instead of looking them as someone who is not able of recovering.
I had that shift also in Haiti through that coordination mechanism. The parallel shadow one we created, this local women-led organization reached out and said, listen, we'd really love if you can come here and bring us, this is what we need, this is what's the situation, please come. And we did, of course. And seeing how they were able to work with the women in their community and the resilience these women had. You know, we were walking through homes that had nothing. Literally, they lost everything. But they told us, you know, like this one lady came to me, she's like, listen, I'm fine. I didn't have much before. So don't come to me and now give me things. I really know how to handle it. But go to my neighbor next door. She's really in a tough situation. And I want you to continue the support with her because she needs a resiliency boost, let's say. And it was so amazing, you know, to see it. Like we were only able to get there through democratizing the system and decentralizing it all. And they are the ones who knew what they need, you know, not me coming to them and giving it to them. So it brings me hope as well. Abril. Abril, thank you so much for coming on the show. Every time we talk, I'm reminded of how this all started. How we were the ones who finally got each other, who saw the same gaps and who knew we had to do something about it. Your passion and drive continues to push this work forward. I'm so grateful for that. I can't wait to see what's next for you, Abril. You've just heard a story about what happens when human urgency collides with humanitarian bureaucracy and how a bit of technology and a lot of trust can shift the balance. If you want to hear more, please subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast or follow our newsletter for more.
Disasters are often unpredictable, but response efforts don't have to be. If you're a part of an aid organization, having the right digital tools can mean the difference between chaos and coordinated action. If you need practical tools for your organization's disaster management, visit mondayert.org. And if you enjoyed this, please share it with one colleague or friend who'd find it useful.